Hey, it's wonderful to be here with you today, Neal. Look, we were introduced by a mutual friend, Scott Newton, and I'm glad we were. I have admired your work, loved your spirit, loved your seriousness, with, to paraphrase you, serious work that you do without taking yourself too seriously. I took one of your masterclasses in storytelling a while ago, which I thought was brilliant. You're clearly a brilliant teacher. I remember many parts of it. And I also remember being a B- student for much of it. I'm not looking for any marks here now, but it was a great experience. And we are going to talk about how you craft your stories and perhaps some of your own stories as well in life. And I'm just grateful to be here with you today. So good to see you.
Thank you very much.
Good to see you. I mean, stories are... How many articles have been written about storytelling? And if you talk to executives and founders, they've all drunk the Kool-Aid. And it's like, yes, I need to tell stories. But I mean, if you ask me, how many do I know who do it really well? I'd struggle. So why is there so much dissonance between the seeming importance of it and just bad stories?
Just for transparency, you sent me questions a few days ago. I looked at them. This was a question.
Yeah.
I just want everyone to know that. It's
Yeah.
It's not something that's out of the blue.
I do that with all guests.
Yeah, no problem. It's great. I don't want it to seem like this is, you just threw me something and I'm responding spontaneously, because I've thought about it. And here's what I don't know. I don't know if I agree with the premise that it is done badly, because here's what I don't know. Does that question imply that there's some sort of objective quality of goodness and that not many folks are reaching it? I don't know how we would resolve that metaphysics. I don't think it means that. I think it means in some aesthetic sense, does it appeal to me? Is the only thing the question can mean, I think, from my point of view. And understood that way, I don't enjoy much of it. I can say that. That's a fact. I don't enjoy much of it, which probably aligns essentially with what you're asking, your point of view, given that you asked the question. But here's what I don't know. Is it because it's not being done well, it's not good? Or is it because my tastes are just so divergent from what other folks are doing that it's inappropriate for me to judge it by its own aesthetic standards? Because I used to like rap music a lot growing up. And someone who doesn't like rap music, they look at it and they go, this is awful, garbage, talentless. But when you look inside and you understand who it's speaking to and how it works, how it operates, differences in style, just all the aesthetic dimensions of it, if you're on the inside, it seems ridiculous for someone to say that. On the other hand, from their point of view, when they look at it, they don't see it that way. And that's a perfectly reasonable judgment for the outsider to make. Now, for a lot of what's done, I don't like it, but here's why I give little weight to what I think. Because I don't watch TV, streaming stuff, except maybe once a quarter. I'll sit down with my wife, we'll watch an episode of something. And in the first 20 minutes of the episode, I think, wow, this is great. I see why people do this. And then at the end, my wife will say, you think we're going to watch episode 2? I say, probably not. At the end, I realize this is just not how I enjoy spending my time. And a lot of it is because I see how a lot of the shows are designed. Like if there's a wrinkle, like acting, that I see, like they're acting, it's clear that they're acting, it breaks the spell for me. And so I don't return. It feels so engineered and designed in a way that doesn't appeal to me, but clearly appeals to lots and lots of people because lots of people enjoy it. And so about once a quarter, I dip my toe in that and I don't like it. And when I come out, it would be foolish of me, obnoxious to say that's bad. It's not being done well. It's just not being done for me.
Yeah.
Like right now, if I put on my Spotify playlist, it would probably start playing Dave Holland Quintet, which is 19-minute odd time, weird jazz songs. And most people would listen to that, I imagine, and go, doesn't work for me. And that's perfectly legitimate. That doesn't mean that it's bad. It just means it doesn't work for them. And Taylor Swift, I have a kid, she likes Taylor Swift. I'm not saying Taylor Swift is bad, but it's definitely not for me.
Yeah.
And so I don't
No, I
enjoy
get it.
it. Can I sense that there's some talent there? Definitely. But do I enjoy it? No. So is it being done well or poorly? I don't know. But it's
Yeah.
a really interesting question for each of us to think when we make these kind of judgments. Do we realize that we're making just incredibly contingent judgments about these things
Yeah.
as an audience? Now, as a storyteller, sorry to hijack your podcast, man, but this is what I do.
Yeah, good.
As a storyteller, it really helps to ask yourself, am I trying to, and I mean this metaphorically just to be clear, in case someone is so thick that they don't understand that after I say this, am I talking to the Taylor Swift audience or am I talking to the Dave Holland Quintet audience? And how I should execute depends heavily on who that audience is. And there's a big Taylor Swift audience on LinkedIn and other places, definitely. And that's fine. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that, but I'm not in that audience. And a challenge I face, since I just mentioned LinkedIn, is I'm not in that audience. And if you want to satisfy your ego and get lots of likes and shares and all of that, statistically, it's true that you have to write for the Taylor Swift kind of audience. Because if you write for the Dave Holland Quintet audience, they might not see it because it just won't be shown very broadly. Because it doesn't know who the Dave Holland Quintet people are. It's not that smart. So those folks might not see it. And so I'll just make a confession. I often face a compromise. Do I do the stuff that, to just bring this all together, that from my point of view is kind of Taylor Swifty?
Yeah, I get it.
To get reach?
Yeah.
And I struggle with that morally. So I try to be Taylor Swifty with Dave Holland execution. And it's kind of hard to merge those. So I'm a poor person to answer that question because my standards are just so radically different. I won't say high, but just so radically different.
And the premise behind my question, which you clearly and brilliantly interrogated and answered in your own ways, I remember moments where people used quick anecdotes and then bragged about storytelling or droned on for minutes on a very self-indulgent, some form of ramble. But I'm now using perhaps some of your way you think about stories and where you practice. I remember both of those moments and I remember exactly what they were trying to convey. So the memorability was there. And actually, I'm not a sort of person to speak ill of people. I'm not perfect, but I'm not somebody who gets highly irritated generally. I mean, my wife might say otherwise, but that's a different topic for another day. But they had an objective, I think, and it sort of worked. And it's a bit like, if I were to riff on it, I remember hiring a foresight speaker many years ago, and there were probably 100 people in the audience. 3 of us came away bitterly disappointed because we'd heard it all before. It's like I could have gone on YouTube, it's virtually the same. The other 97, the equivalent of the Taylor Swift, right, were absolutely delighted, raving about it. They were sharing it with everyone. And we weren't the right people because we were like the aficionados in our own eyes. But actually, it's like we were not relevant. He didn't really care that we came away disappointed because the 97 were absolutely high-fiving him and buying his book and various other things.
Imagine how hard his task would have been if he had been pitching to the 3 of you, right?
Yeah, and it wouldn't have met any of his objectives.
It would have been foolish, right?
And we'd have got into a silly intellectual competition, which I used to get into a lot. You know, who knows more about? I mean, which is futile, and I've moved on from as I've aged.
Can I make a distinction? Because in that example with the 97 people and the 3 of you, it's that I'm going to make a distinction between the syntax, the semantics, and the style in storytelling. So the syntax is the structure, hero's journey, whatever people talk about. The semantics is what sort of content do you plug into that structure to develop a story? And then the style is how do you execute that?
Yeah.
Syntax, semantics, and style. you can say, I'm familiar with what this fellow is saying, so it's not new to me. And so what's the big deal? And that's sort of the content. And that can make what is being said less interesting and less effective. What I experience, just given what I think about all day, is a different problem. Not, oh, I already know that. Because if someone can say something I already know in an interesting way,
Sure.
I want to hear it. My problem that makes it difficult for me to appreciate it, I get distracted because I kind of know how the sausage is made. And so I see the will behind it.
Mm.
And for me, my definition of bad acting is acting that looks like acting.
Mm.
And when I try to watch one of those shows once a quarter and I see the bad acting, and a lot of it's good acting, but there can just be some bad acting, just non-existent bad acting. It breaks the spell for me. I come out of it and I realize, oh, this is what I'm doing.
Mm.
And it distracts me and it doesn't work. I'm very, very sensitive to that.
Right.
And so in storytelling, I see that. And in certain genres, like, oh, the heavy-handed hook, that first sentence has to be a hook. And they thought about it, and it's just so clearly deliberate in trying to do that to get people to click that it feels dishonest to me.
Yeah.
So it's just artistically dishonest, I feel.
Yeah.
And so it breaks the spell and I don't enjoy it. But you know what? That works for a lot of people.
How do you get to the point where, whether you're one of the founders or executives you work with day in, day out, where it does feel more, I don't know what the right words are, authentic, seamless, natural, even though it may have been rehearsed and thought about. So it's not like, hey, here's the flag, here it comes, come on. And if you are on the recipient end of somebody wanting a more of a conversational style rather than, and there are people, as you just said, who want the, hey, give it to me. I want here's the story part of the conversation or the pitch or the presentation. How do you get to that? Is that there's mastery, of course, but is that practice? Is that mindset? How do you get closer to that more seamless, authentic delivery?
By not feeling that one needs to tell a story. So just all the, sorry, brother, you can bleep this, but all the
No, you say what
bullshit,
you want.
right? All the bullshit that you read about what you need to do and these instances that you've observed that have caused you to inductively arrive at your notion of what a story is by watching a bunch of bad TED Talks that are highly engineered, just designed to manipulate you and that work for the Taylor Swift audience. They work. And you think that's what it is. So a lot of the clumsy execution is, okay, I'm getting to that moment where I need to do that thing, that little mini TED Talk thing. I'm about to tell a story. I need to do that thing. And one starts to feel intimidated by that. And then you know what? Then here comes the bad acting. It's the glitch in the matrix at that point. And anyone is like, okay, he's doing it. Like he set this up. There's something behind it.
Yeah.
And it doesn't just come out. And when can it just come out and be effective and be conversational? When you abandon all of the need to have that structure that you've read about. I'm rereading a book right now, Against Method by Paul Feyerabend. Paul Feyerabend was a philosopher of science, and his position in the philosophy of science, anti-Popper, anti-anyone who thinks there's a scientific method, hence the name of the book, Against Method, is that there is no scientific method, that science progresses, the cumulative development of knowledge progresses by pursuing a anarchistic epistemological strategy. Anything goes is his point of view in the book. And right, he's this sort of dissident philosopher of science. One doesn't know for sure whether or not he believes what he's saying, but he's incredibly charismatic and interesting. And so whether or not what he's saying is true, it's interesting. Now, to take that, a good strategy that I found with people that I work with is, hey, let's abandon all that. We don't need to worry about all that junk. You read some book, some dude self-published, 38 pages. You bought it on your Kindle for 99 cents, had some bad graphics that he downloaded from Word. You forget all that. And let's just come up with something that's real. And then we'll just find a way to make it meaningful for you so that that point in the conversation, it's just going to come out of you naturally.
Mm.
And it might just be a metaphor. It might be a remark. It might be a 3-sentence story. It might be a 7-minute story. But let's find the stuff that's real and truthful and not this corny manipulation. Bob needed to buy some laundry detergent. So he, that kind of junk in your startup pitch that's just like, that's like a cartoon, man. Don't do that. When you get serious people, and I only work with serious people, I really kind of vet them. They want to be effective. And to be effective, you really need to just get rid of all of that stuff and just find a way of saying something that is interesting.
Yeah.
And once you realize that that's your main objective, not to follow these rules, but largely, if you strip it all away, your primary objective is to be interesting. Because when you're interesting, and I mean in the right ways, right? If someone wants to quibble with that, but when you're interesting in the right ways, you know what? People want to engage with you. They want to know more. They want to invite you back. They want to give you money. They want to work with you when you are interesting in a good way. So if you see, okay, that's it. And this storytelling thing, maybe it's nothing more than being interesting. That's my task. So just reconstrue that, abandon all that stuff, have an anarchist view of what you're doing, and you will probably be better off. Because otherwise, you're going to get to that point where, I got to tell a story. Here's where I got to start acting. Fix your tie. And then we all feel it, and the spell is broken, and we lose trust in you because it feels like manipulation.
Yeah.
It needs to be truthful.
I'm just reminiscing on how many times I've done that. Anyway, how do you know
Are
somebody?
you with me? Are you following me?
Yeah, I'm getting it. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm just partly reflecting on the good and the good, the bad, the ugly, what I've done. But how do you know if somebody's serious when you're looking to vet them?
A couple very clear markers. I have conversations with them like this. And one of the most important indicators, it's simple, is he taking notes? Like right now, we're meeting, we're discussing something. Is he taking notes? And serious people take notes. I'm not saying that all of them take notes, but statistically, serious people take notes because they want to get better.
Yes.
And serious people will also, you can develop a sense pretty quickly, be open to taking risks. And how does one assess that? I don't know, just sort of through a conversation, you can kind of get a sense. Have you thought about this? Have you tried that? In someone who is so conservative that they won't take risks, isn't going to execute. They're not going to do anything interesting. They're going to fall back. But I thought that was the way we're supposed to do it. Like that mini TED Talk thing, because that's what
like
everyone's. I can't do it this way that you're telling me because that's kind of weird.
Yeah.
Another way is just is the person interesting already? Because if there's a base rate, like this person is interesting, and this person can, one way you can establish this pretty much makes you interesting. It's a sufficient condition. Is if the person listens. If the person is a good listener, that person is interesting. Okay, so interesting is not having a mohawk, right, and like a Harley tattoo.
No, I get it.
With a Lexus sticker on it. Why anyone would do that, but it's really just being present. And you can immediately assess whether or not someone is present.
I'm curious about how you get into the right mindset and headspace. You can be interesting. And I'm not trying to be woo-woo, but I can think of individuals and different versions of myself where either you're conditioned by the environment you're in, you've been brought up with playbooks coming out of your head, your ears, and so forth. And so whilst you may want to just be ready to just riff and play, and I have a jazz background, I was an amateur jazz guy, improvise and so on. But how do you get into that space where you just let it come out rather than 5 minutes in, right, here we go, flag, done, playbook, execute? How do, either from your own experience, Neal, or from people you worked with, what sort of things help people unshackle themselves and just get real and be real?
I lived in Singapore for 15 years. We moved to the US 3 years ago. When I came back, I really wanted to make some North Carolina pulled pork. There's a special way of cooking pork here where it falls apart. You break it apart. It's called pulled pork.
Mm.
And even in this small little state in the eastern side of the US, even within it, there are differences, radical differences in barbecue sauces. So there's the Western kind of ketchup-y red, and then there's the Eastern vinegar-based. And I'm happy I'm moving back to the US after a long time. I'd gone to school in North Carolina. I want to make some pulled pork. I can do that now. Like it just feels right to go back and to do that.
Lovely.
And I went to Cliff's Meat Market in Carborough, which is just a town over. And the guy says, "How much do you want?" I said, "I don't know." He said, "What do you make?" I said, "Pulled pork." I said, "Maybe a pound or maybe 2 pounds because I haven't made this and I don't want to waste a lot. I don't know how it's going to turn out." And the guy said, "You got to believe in yourself, brother." And I bought 6 pounds. And I came home and I cooked it and it was shitty. I overcooked it. But your question was, how can you get people to be real? And if you believe in yourself, and like feel, actually, I have something interesting to say. I am interesting. It's when you start to accept that, it allows you to do it, to jam, to do that jazz thing. Until you accept that, until you believe in yourself, we're going to see it when that happens. We're going to see it. But if you believe in yourself, you can just ride it. You just ride moment to moment. You trust yourself to get there. You enjoy it, and you can do that. And it doesn't need to be this stage sequence of moves. Uh-oh, wait, what happens? Because this happened early in the conversation. I was expecting it to happen later. What do I just roll with it? How do you do that? You got to believe in yourself. Maybe the story that you show up with doesn't feel right for the moment. You see that the guy has some golf trophy on the shelf behind him. In your mind is some golf story. So you repurpose on the fly some little story that you have about golf to bring that person in.
Yeah.
But how can you do that? Believe in yourself, one, and believe also it doesn't really matter, right? If it fails, like if it who cares? No one is going to notice. If it fails, it probably wasn't going to work anyway, so there was no opportunity cost. So when you believe in yourself and you realize that it doesn't matter what other people think if the story doesn't work. But what I would like to do is enjoy the moment. And if we restrict ourselves to storytelling as skill, I would like to further my development of that skill. And so I will try that right now. And I'll try to freestyle on his golf trophy and tell him something that will make us connect rather than just talking about our work history, our CV, or maybe even if we get really deep, how many kids we have, right? But if I really want to connect with him, I can tell him about how I got drunk on the golf course one day with a martini and I flung my club and I hit Bill Paxton. Do you know Bill Paxton? I know Bill Paxton. Did he ever tell you about me hitting him with the club? It was my third martini. Oh, that was you. That would be winning the lottery if you both knew Bill Paxton. And I don't play golf myself. But if you see that and you're willing to risk it and do something different and be colorful, if it works, it can create enormous value.
Yeah.
And if it fails, no one will notice. There's this really massive asymmetric risk, I think, in trying to be interesting. There's huge upside tail opportunity, and the downside is capped. You know why? Because most people are boring. So if you're boring too, you're just going to be like everyone else, right there in the bulk of the distribution, indistinguishable from everyone else. But if you want to be effective and get the work, get the deal, get the opportunity, make people want to be around you, go out here. How do you get out there? You got to believe in yourself. You got to take some risk.
I love that.
I'm making all this up.
That sounds good, and I believe it. It's interesting reflecting on some of the best teams I've worked in when we have, moved around, riffed, because that just felt right. It was comfortable. We weren't looking at each other, going red in the face, getting stiffer, saying, "Hey, you've missed your slot," and that's the problem of over rehearsing. And also feeling in an unsafe sort of environment. I mean, you mentioned moving from Singapore to back to the States, and obviously you moved career as well as moving country, and you brought your family with you. But you clearly had belief, I'm guessing, to do that, belief in yourself. But tell me about the biggest thoughts, challenges that went through your mind as you went through multiple transitions. I'm just curious. I'm really curious.
As I went through transitions, or the thought process that generated transitions?
Both, being greedy.
I used to study memory. So I did a PhD in psychology and I studied memory. That's what I was doing early on in my PhD.
Hmm.
And if you study memory seriously, I was doing cognitive psychology. One thing that you learn is how incredibly unreliable memory is, that memory is reconstructive. That memory is not like storing some information in the cloud or on some disk in your brain and then later retrieving it veridically just as it was. Here's the copy. Let me view it. Let me plug it in. Oh, yeah, that's what I was thinking. It doesn't work that way. It's incredibly reconstructive. So we take sort of sparse bits right now. And like, what do we do in forecasting? In forecasting, we try to imagine what the future will be like. When we are remembering something, we're actually trying to postcast, in a sense, imagine what the past was like. And to answer your question in just a very disappointing way, I don't remember a lot of that process. Whatever bits I do remember, I don't entirely trust because of this reconstructive nature of things. But when I just go to a high, sort of very coarse level of it, not looking at specifics, but a coarse level, I realize that what drives changes in my life is generally boredom. Like when I can drill down this and that, but really what happens, what governs the general dynamics of my life? Boredom, some kind of punctuated equilibrium, do something very different, state of sort of destabilized confusion for a while. What do I do? What do I want to focus on? Where am I going with this? Gain traction, launch. Go to a new, pucker around for a while, get bored. Okay, what function is just boom, boom, boom. So I was a faculty, a business school faculty, seemed like the dream job. And I think, is this what I want to keep doing? No. Yeah. Just like I used to rap. I used to sample vinyl records and make beats, and I was obsessed with it. I used to practice drum rudiments, and I was obsessed with it. And I've had just this kind of sequence of, like, those are kind of hobbyish obsessions. And that's at a low level, but my interests have worked the same way. I was very interested in cognitive science. I was very interested in philosophy of science. I was very interested in optimal search problems. That's what my research was about when I was an academic. Then I became obsessively interested in storytelling. And then my kid was born and I became obsessively interested as a project and wrote a poetry book for her. And then I became boom, boom, boom. And at each level, when I go up kind of fractally, this happens. When I go up, it kind of happened at a career level also. Like, do I want to keep doing this? No, this is kind of boring now. It was awesome for a while, but this is kind of boring now. And so now I'm in a new regime, I think, coming out of a kind of transient in the new regime, gaining my ground. And I have one business that I do and another business that I kind of want to do. I'm not sure. In one business, it's just helping people explain what they're doing, their storytelling. I work with serious people on interesting problems, and that business is great. It's easy. Stuff comes to me. The problems are interesting. We make an enormous difference. It's immediately clear, generally, of the impact that the work is having, and it's great. It's easy. Then I have another business I'm flirting with. And this is the new transient, trying to figure out
Yeah.
what's going to
Yeah.
happen in the new regime, what's going to dominate the new regime, because the first 3 years in the new regime are not what the new regime is about. It's a transient phase,
Sure. Yeah.
right? So the other part is, because it ends up happening with the folks I work with over here, and I was doing some of it when I was a business professor, is structuring something to help people figure out their identity with a focus on storytelling. So, what are the stories you tell yourself? What are the stories you tell others? How does that help you understand what you believe you want, why you might be mistaken in that belief? What is it that you truly want? Let's interrogate that by using story to structure it, sort of a lens to experience it, to organize it.
Mm.
And at the same time, because this activity of storytelling is so effective, let's learn to craft and shape those stories so that they can be told to others and that our relationships can deepen because of this activity.
Yeah.
So it's like what you were doing in that master class, but that was too brief, and it wasn't announced with the right focus. And I've learned a lot of things about what it should be. And so, what is the new regime going to look like? It might be about helping people develop that identity through storytelling,
That's
with
so
the
powerful.
additional benefits that you'll be able to use this actually pragmatically in your work professionally, but most importantly, just you will start to believe in yourself, and you'll start to critically, looping it back to the early part of the conversation so we don't forget, it will help you be interesting. And this is, I think, often neglected when people talk about this, to realize that life is more interesting, that your life is more interesting.
Mm.
Because when something happens in life and you don't see the structure in it and shape it and try to craft it to squeeze the meaning out of it, it just goes past. It was just getting a flat tire
Mm.
at the supermarket. Oh man, I got a flat tire. I had to go to the Toyota dealership. It can be that, or it can be something so much more interesting, because that reminds you of something else, and you start to see structure in your thinking, patterns in your thinking. You start to understand yourself, and you realize that those small things are part of that, and therefore they are interesting, and that there's value, and that one can realize how interesting it is through, and this is what's really important, through the very intentional activity of shaping all of it and crafting it and organizing it into sort of quality art, and not just some shitty little story following some little formula. You got to be vulnerable,
Yeah.
emotional,
Yeah.
like all that garbage. Okay, I'll be less diplomatic now.
Mm.
Like, while all of that is true, it's not, in my opinion, by like Dave Holland Quintet, it's not nearly as important as actually trying to take all of it and organize it and polish it and shape it so that it's really good, that it has quality. Now, what is quality? I don't know. Go read Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. It's a very difficult problem. But when you have the goal of seeing that structure and shaping it into something that is meaningful and you should feel actually good about sharing because it's quality, it's not just some manipulative garbage, some thin
Yeah.
garbage.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I want to figure out a way to do that. I think that might be what the new regime is about. I don't know. I'm in the transient right now, and that the other stuff is working so well has the unfortunate consequence of making me kind of not lazy, but it doesn't feel so urgent to do that. But that
Yeah.
feels like the right thing. It feels like what I should be doing.
It's interesting the way you talk, Neil, and the way you write eloquently. There's a restlessness. You're searching for quality. You're searching for the truth. Yeah, there's a strong self-critique that comes through. So I'm curious, and if not nosy, about how are you when you're going through those transient stages yourself? How are you to be with? And the reason I ask that, and I'm going to answer the question you asked right at the beginning of why do I ask the question, is I've seen people and seen versions of myself where that can be really if you're doing it with other people and they understand the journey and you're crafting new identities with people as opposed to just on your own, that can be very liberating and energizing, very positive. Or you can be really difficult, grouchy, self-absorbed as you're going through those changes. I'm nosy. How are you during those changes and the changes you're going through at the moment?
I think it would depend on who you ask. If you, and we'll have to make a kind of contingency table here. If you ask my wife, you'll get one answer. If you ask someone else, you'll get a different answer.
Sure.
Now, if you ask my wife, it sort of depends on her mood, right? What she's going to answer. It's all reconstructive. Am I grouchy from my own inner experience? Sometimes. But I don't think that I'm trying to be honest. I'm trying to give you a really honest answer.
Yeah.
Like, what is the actual truth, whatever that means? And I know the answer. I don't think I'm ever grouchy about, as a result of experiencing the dynamics. There is one time when I'm grouchy, just with probability 1, I'm going to respond in a grouchy fashion. It's when I'm thinking or writing about wherever I am in that dynamics, and I'm zoomed in, and my absolute OCD just zooms in on it. If you want to turn me into an asshole, interrupt me. What? Right? When I'm focused, I'm in the zone, and I might just be just standing in the kitchen. So it doesn't, I'm not just out in the woods, hidden in a cabin all the time doing it, but I could just be in the moment, cooking my scrambled eggs. And if someone disturbs me, I can get grouchy. So I don't know, when someone disturbs my solipsism, I guess I'm grouchy, but otherwise, here's, I'm freestyling a little bit here. I don't know if everyone has this experience, but something like this, I have it quite regularly. Go to Home Depot, buying a staple gun. Mabel from Hillsboro is checking me out. I'm paying, not looking at me because I'm so hot, but I'm paying. And I'll witness myself, wow, you're very friendly to her. You're like chit-chatting and you're like a friendly person. And the reason why I say that is because, to contradict what I said a moment ago, perhaps, but a foolish consistency is a hobgoblin of little minds. I'm not too constrained by consistency. I have kind of a notion of myself as a grumpy person. Not a grumpy person, but I just want to be left alone. Now, that can be perceived as grumpy, so it can be perceived as grumpy, but I don't really think that it's grumpy. So,
but there's something about control there.
Winding ass answer to your question.
No, I get it.
But that's the truth.
Yeah, but it's sort of when you want to be in your place and zone and do your work, you don't want to be interrupted. It's interesting. My own realization on a slightly adjacent topic is I've been doing some work recently with somebody else, actually hiring I don't know what you call him, just a good person to help me think about stuff. First time I've done that for a while. I've had coaches and advisors on other aspects, but this is about my life and journey. Is even with lots of real and perceived, constraints in your life, which I have, both real and perceived. Actually, we all have, even people who are struggling to meet different needs, have a lot more optionality than we think. And actually, there's a lot more that we can see and sense and feel about the world. So those moments, for example, if I personalize, I'm riffing now as well. My birthday the last few days, on one level, was it as dramatic as all my friends would say, have you gone to a spa for the whole day and have you done this and been all about you? Absolutely not. Fail. And that was never going to happen. But I decided intentionally, and this is not woo-woo, this is very sincere, to just find joy and just goodness throughout the day. Quick conversation with the barista, the moment where my wife took some cake, it's very traditional in Indians, she's Indian, where you give each other cake, right? Just small micro moments that actually were just wonderful. But it was a choice. It was a choice to just go with that moment and then ignore the fact that for the other 8 hours, I was still doing the same stuff I typically do in a day. And I say that because that's about my grumpiness is when I mentally feel more constrained than I actually am. And that's actually down to me. A lot of that is down to me. And some of your work, and I say this with absolute sincerity, some of your work actually has helped me, you haven't realized this, work through the, okay, precision, you're a very precise person, precision about, okay, and deduction and causality of what's going on here, what do I really feel, what can I really do, and sort of cutting out the bullshit, the waste, the lazy thinking, and going, okay, what have I got right here to play with? And so Phil, I wanted to say thank you for that. But it's my own version of how I deal with transitions and transient sort of stages. That makes sense?
Yeah, it makes absolute sense, and I really appreciate you saying that. It means a lot.
Mm.
I don't think I've written about this. It's because I feel like it will just sound too bullshitty, like a literature professor talking about chaos theory or something. Like, I don't want to be that guy. But and what sparked this was the word optionality. Just realizing that the idea that I keep playing with is that when, and if anyone is watching this, I feel this is the most important thing I'll say. I feel like there's something meaningful here, as kind of obvious or nonsensical as it is. Let's see. That when you realize that your life is this sort of random series of transitions over which you have some control, but there's also a lot of randomness. So you have control and there's randomness. And when you imagine where you are right now and you ask yourself, does this feel right? And if the answer is no, it seems reasonable to assume that if you don't do something, it's going to continue to feel that way. You can cross your fingers and maybe it will change, but it's probably going to change that way. But if it doesn't feel right, and remember, in this simple model, we have some control, we have some randomness. Going back to Cliff's Meat Market and the pulled pork, if you believe in yourself, which means, look, I can turn that control knob and I have reasonable control and I have the discipline and the belief in myself that's going to allow me to turn that knob and to take control, then this feeling of unease that I have right now, I don't need to carry on with it because I can take control. I can do something different. I don't know where it's going to end up, right? If I do something quite different, like change careers, for example, but it can be anything. If you believe in yourself and you feel that way, it seems to be a very unfortunate instance of a kind of status quo bias just to persist there because it might get worse.
Yes.
And if you believe in yourself, and I mean this, I don't want to sound too motivational, but I believe this. But if you believe in yourself and you can control that, then like there's going to be some randomness in the outcomes, right? And where I end up in the distribution at the end. If we ran this simulation a bunch of times because of the randomness, there'd be some distribution 20 years ahead. But if I believe in myself versus not believing in myself, I'm going to limit the variance of that distribution where I end up. Whereas if I just stay right here doing what I'm doing, I'm going to end up over there. When I think about optionality that way, that the optionality, remember you sparked this, the optionality that I'm relying on is myself, my future selves, making good decisions when those options present themselves. Like this guy right now trusts the guy 10 years from now. He trusts the guy 5 years from now. That guy's going to do the right thing. He'll fuck up sometimes, but more often than not, he's going to do the right thing. And so if I pivot, I recourse because it doesn't feel right, I trust him. Why? Because believing in myself is not just believing in this guy, but also trusting, believing in that guy 5 years from now. And so let me do him a favor and put him on a path where he can update and learn as much as possible. And he looks back, he'll say, thank you, right? Instead of, man, why didn't you do something?
Yeah.
Right? I don't want him to say that.
So true.
And all of that just requires on recognizing stuff you can control, stuff you can't control. There's optionality embedded throughout your life, right? As you progress forward. And your decision amounts to whether or not you trust yourself to do the right thing. As soon as you construe things that way, what is there to worry about? Assuming you believe in yourself. But you can't bullshit yourself and say, oh, I believe in myself, man. I never doubt it. I don't have any regrets. People tell themselves, or at least they tell other people a lot of bullshit, a lot of lies.
Yeah, that's true.
Like, do I believe in myself? Do I doubt myself? Yeah, I doubt myself. Like, I'm telling you all this, that you need to do all of that, and I can do it because I believe in myself. I also doubt myself.
Yeah.
Like, am I full of shit? Am I overconfident? Have I deluded myself because I think I'm interesting and I sort of charm myself into believing this bullshit, or there's a random component and all this, got my little models waving hands? Am I fooling myself? Am I deluding myself? This is my meta experience of myself as I tell you this right now. So I think that's what this new regime, going back again about 9 minutes ago, is helping people work through that, because I think there's not only storytelling, but they're just, and this is one of the benefits from being an academic for a long time. There's a lot of benefits. One is to learn to kind of think in a certain style, dealing with math and models and probability realizations and all of that. There's a lot of value, I think, in bringing it into the problems that we all face. And when you realize that, okay, I more or less, but Neal describes this dynamic process, more or less that describes how life is going to work. Yes, I will have the option to make decisions. Yes, more or less, I do trust myself. But what's going to help me figure out where I want to go? Well, my stories, my narrative, how I understand. And also that understanding is going to feed into which options I choose to exercise, because the stories I tell myself are going to shape my preferences. And so how do I develop stories right now? They're going to lead to the right construal of my life that make me take the right decisions and the right action. And it's not separable, right? It all comes together.
All integrated,
It helps to have a whiteboard to talk about all this, but I think more or less that's a sketch.
You can't get that academic part of you out of you too soon. That sort of belief in yourself, that trust in your future self, and looking back and knowing that you have options, and being comfortable with the sort of the vicissitudes, the journeys, of life. Just a better way to lead life. Just such a much better, and that you clearly have, through your own experiences and the work you do, a way that is both scientific in the way you just described, but also is sort of real and lived. And I appreciate that, and I appreciate you. And I'm also mindful and respectful of time and your attention. So unless
can I just say one thing? Yeah, please, I do.
Yeah.
One of so being an academic gives one a lot, but it also comes with baggage. Like when I hear you say, thinking about it scientifically, one part of me thinks that's true, but I need that word to be understood scientifically as kind of a metaphor. Like metaphorically, it's a scientific construal of things, but I'm not claiming that it's scientific.
No, it's fair.
Rather, it's a perhaps a pedantic distinction, but it's more a poetic characterization of it all. And the kind of satire of it really is that it's presented scientifically, but it's all serious at the same time. Do you know what I mean?
The way I was, I get that. I guess the way I was inelegantly describing it was, if you read your work and you look at, this is not a shameless plug, although I'll give one, plotwolf.com, where you describe yourself. There is a clarity and a purity of how you describe yourself. And for me, this is my judgment, maybe wrong. Some of your background in, asking the questions of this, is this information, is this data, is this evidence, is there causality, all those questions that you typically, I think, permeates how you think and how you articulate what you do, how you do it, and so forth, without it necessarily being an empirical study that, and so forth. I think I get the distinction, but I think it is, and the fact that you don't constrain yourself as other people with a scientific background do to, this is the method. By the way, I am the expert on X. You must follow the A to Z guide. It's the classic, the innovation people. right? Probably some of the most lacking in innovation in how they think and how they lead their life, but have published lots of studies on how innovation works. For me, that is lacking in congruence and coherence and, frankly, integrity. That's not you, and that's what I applaud.
I appreciate that. I feel the same way. I think to make a more general point out of what you just said, I think it helps to, and I mean this metaphorically, know what genre you're reading, know what the rules of the genre are, and know what genre you're participating in.
Yes.
And for me, it's helped. Like, look, I'm no longer an academic, so I'm no longer constrained by the need to provide references and citations to back up any claim because reviewer number 2 might object. I'm liberated now.
Yes.
I'm still talking in the same way that I learned over there, but now I'm not doing it in this sort of antagonistic academic game where we try to find fault with one another. I don't have to play that with you anymore. I can take it, use it to write my poetry, essentially, and say some of the same things perhaps in a different way. And that's very, very, very massively liberating, not having to play by those rules. So going back to my point about if you have that feeling of unease, that was a big part of the feeling of unease for me, is like, I don't like this genre. I don't believe in the genre, the academic genre. That's a whole nother question. And now I'm struggling with, okay, I want to liberate myself. I do believe in myself, but there's still like some form or version of me that's a critic. Like, you can't bullshit. You can't say that, because then you're going to be one of these thin literature professors talking about chaos theory, full of shit. Don't be that guy. So I have this amalgam of sort of critics that are governing, hopefully keeping me under control, while at the same time permitting me to liberate myself and to use clarity to say something.
Yeah. And the way I see that is you're using all that to create your own space and your own identities and shaking yourself up regularly to do so. And I'm grateful for you sharing your wisdom, being real about it, having an honest, regular conversation, as well as sharing some stuff that people can really learn from. And I'm grateful for the conversation and another episode of Lancefield on the Line. Neal, you're a great guy. Thank you ever so much.
Thanks, brother.